All right, let's jump right into this. We're going to explore a really wild modern magic system, one that takes a famous horror story and says, hey, this isn't just a story, it's a tool you can use to actually rewrite reality.
And this really kicks off with a quote supposedly from the entity Nyarlathotep itself. The mythos is a door you have mistaken for a story. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's framing H.P. Lovecraft's entire creation not as fiction, but as a functional doorway. But a doorway to what exactly? And how on earth could a story work like that anyway? So, to even begin to wrap our heads around how a story could become a door, we've got to look at the world we're already in. You know, a world where for a lot of us, the line between what's real and what's fake has pretty much just vanished.
And this gets us to this key concept of hyperreality, which comes from the philosopher Jean Baudrillard. He basically argued that we're living in a state where the simulation, the image, the brand, the idea of a thing has become way more real and important than the actual thing it's supposed to represent. You've heard the map is not the territory, right? Well, in hyperreality, the map has completely replaced the territory. We're all living on the map now.
And Baudrillard even laid out how we got here in these 4 stages. You know, we start with a simple, faithful copy of a real thing. Then that copy gets twisted and distorted. Pretty soon we're making copies of things that never even had an original in the first place. And finally, bam, you're in pure simulation. The classic example is a theme park's Main Street. It feels more like a real American town than any actual town does. A perfect copy of something that never truly existed.
And here's the kicker, the really crucial point. In a world like this, a world just drowning in media and symbols, the gap between what you can imagine and what you can make real gets razor thin. All those tools used by advertisers and by magicians, belief, repetition, manipulating symbols, they suddenly become these incredibly powerful forces for actually building the reality we all agree on.
Okay, so if we're living in a kind of simulation, how do you interact with it? How do you hack it? Well, the answer is this powerful and genuinely weird idea that really serves as the engine for this whole system.
It's called hyperstition, and what it describes is a kind of fiction, an idea, a story, even a meme that acts like a virus. Once you unleash it, it starts changing reality around it to create the conditions for its own truth. This isn't just about believing something. It's a fiction that is actively working to make itself a fact.
Now this is where it gets really strange. Hyperstition seems to mess with time. It works on this kind of time loop logic, what you might call retrocausality. It's as if a prophecy from the future is literally reaching back into the past to cause the very things that will eventually make it come true. The effect actually becomes its own cause. Wild, right? And you know what? This isn't just theory. You can see the stuff playing out right now. Just look at the whole conversation around artificial general intelligence. The fear of a future superintelligence that doesn't exist yet is already shaping our laws and our technology choices today. The very idea of a future AI is pulling our present toward a timeline where it's inevitable. It's a real-world hyperstition in action.
So let's put the pieces together. We've got the where, our hyper-real world, and we've got the how, that time-bending engine of hyperstition. Now we can finally assemble the whole thing and look at the system itself. A very modern kind of magic called Hyper-Sothery.
Okay, I know. This definition is a mouthful. It looks super dense, but you can really think of it like a recipe. It's saying, take the Cthulhu Mythos, use it as a giant and self-growing spell, which then creates these psychic entities, which then punch holes in our simulated reality to something called the outside. Let's break that down piece by piece.
First up, the operating system. The software this whole thing runs on is Chaos Magick, and its core idea is actually super simple. Belief is a tool. It's not about what's true, it's about what works. So who cares if Cthulhu is real? All that matters is if believing in him and using his symbols gets you a result. If it works, it works. End of story.
So what's the spell? Well, it's not some little symbol you draw. It's what's called a hyper-sigil. And in this case, the hyper-sigil is the entire Cthulhu Mythos. Every story, every video game, every comic book, every silly meme you see online, it's all part of one massive, living, constantly changing magical spell. And the craziest part? Every time you interact with it, you're feeding it energy, whether you realize it or not.
And what happens when you have this massive hyper-sigil that millions of people are pouring their attention and fear into? You get egregores. All that focused energy makes the big players, Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth, start to take on a life of their own. They stop being just characters and become these semi-autonomous thought forms. living entities that exist in our shared collective consciousness.
So let's recap. We have a system that uses a fictional story to create powerful psychic entities inside of our simulated reality. So the final and most important question is why? I mean, what's the goal? What's the point of doing all this? And this is where it gets really fascinating, because the source material points to two very different possibilities.
And this really is the core question, isn't it? Which path do you go down? Is Hyper-Sothery just a really advanced psychological tool, a way to use these powerful horror archetypes to master your own mind and get better at navigating the weird world we live in? Or is it a full-blown metaphysical engineering project, an attempt to use these egregores as anchors to literally pry open a gate and make contact with actual, non-human intelligences from some other dimension?
So that really leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. Forget about Cthulhu and magic for just a second. If any of this is even remotely plausible, if our collective belief really is a tool that shapes the world, then you have to ask, what other realities are we building right now completely by accident? What fictions, what stories are we all telling each other that are right now, at this very moment, busy making themselves real?